Almost everyone recognizes this icon, the Ten Commandments. Many have zealously fought to have this icon preserved at courthouse buildings. We've put it on our walls, in our offices, and our homes. And yes, we consciously embrace it. We don't lie. We don't steal. We don't murder. And we certainly don't bow down to idols, right? According to Jesus of Nazareth, the first commandment was identified as the greatest commandment. But have we ever looked at this commandment closely? Do we even know where in our Bible to find it? Is this one short sentence the entirety of what God says about the first commandment? A quick turn to Exodus chapter 20 reveals the commandment that we saw at the courthouse. We may notice several things. God Himself is speaking. We have additional content. In the topic subtitle, we have a reference to Deuteronomy chapter 5. In Deuteronomy, we find the same commandment, but preceded by 6 verses of information. This is indeed more information than we saw at the courthouse, and I don't think it's radical to say when God speaks, the details matter. From the top of Mount Sinai, the God of Abraham spoke these words to several million people below. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. It described a book of instruction or law for them to follow. He insisted that they carefully follow it. This resulted in the protection of liberties with a system of justice. It also facilitated a wonderful relationship. Disturbingly, according to modern Christianity, He brought them miles and miles out into the hot desert, not to take them out of bondage, but to put them in bondage. Yes, according to Paul, the covenant given at Mount Sinai was originally designed to put them in bondage under the law. Instead of the law being helpful, it's labeled the law of sin and death, and it's said to be against us. Even though God said it could be obeyed, Paul corrected God and said, no, it can't. It is impossible to keep. No matter how you strive toward obedience, according to Paul, the God of Abraham set you up to fail merely as a tool to prove to you how bad you are. According to Paul, Jesus came and obeyed the law once, not as a shining example, but to make obedience a non-goal for everyone else. And if you make obedience your goal, shame on you, because according to Paul, that's insulting to Jesus. Paul did everything in his power to undermine God's message at Mount Sinai. What do you think Paul will say about the origin of the law? Will he speak of how millions of the house of Israel stood in awe, literally terrified, as the ground quaked at the voice of God? How they were afraid that the power of the Almighty might cause their heartbeats to stop? How the holy words he read with Gamaliel proclaimed that God spoke these commandments himself from heaven? Who would be so brazen to dispute such a thing? Paul would. Paul claims that God's law was just a cheap fix, unimportant and temporary. And besides, it didn't come from one God, it came from a group of angels. And you foolish Galatians, what kind of fool would want to be in bondage to a bunch of angels? Returning to the top of the Ten Commandments text in Deuteronomy, it becomes very clear that God does indeed expect the commandments to be kept. Later, after describing the blessings for obedience and the curses for disobedience, he encourages them earnestly to choose life. Over and over, we see similar pleas in the prophets. Paul scoffs at this notion, saying that it's impossible that the law would give life. He implies that the law itself was a failure because it was impossible. The lies of Paul are too vast to cover in this video. For now, let's return to the Great Commandment. If there was a test to verify whether you love God or not, would you want to know about it? According to God, there is a test. God says you will be tested. Why? He wants to know whether you love Him or someone else more. So what's always the right thing to do? Same thing as Jesus told the rich young ruler. Obey God's commandments. Serve Him. Hold fast to Him. But wait, Paul didn't tell me to go after other gods and serve them, right? Declaring Paul as my God is something that never happened to me. What happened was something much more subtle. Rather than saying Paul is my God, I instead said, the words of Paul are the inspired commandments of my God. I believed that God's words at Sinai were for someone else, and Paul's words were for me. I bought the notion hook, line, and sinker that God used, quote, progressive revelation, end quote, meaning the latest information we have from Him is always the best information. Therefore, I thought it was perfectly appropriate to bend what I read in the Old Testament to fit Paul's philosophy. I was therefore serving other gods by not only following somebody who spoke evil of my God, but even giving primacy to His commands over those from God Almighty. Eventually, I repented. The full text of the command to love God above all others reveals something about His love languages. He wants to be recognized, not unfairly recognized as some ruthless tyrant that demands the impossible and punishes offenses unfairly. No, He wants to be recognized as the kind, benevolent, long-suffering God who did amazing miracles to bring our forefathers into a relationship. And He provided us with instructions to help us, not hurt us. He wants obedience. He really does know what's best for us. And how can He bless us if we won't cooperate? And lastly, He wants loyalty. Don't run off after the first shiny thing that catches your eye. Have some wisdom and have some character.